All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is daily vlog number 307, I think it is. And today, we are going to talk about the Veilguard. So one of my more popular videos recently has been when I talked about how there are quite a few different people that were saying Veilguard is this woke garbage game, and I just didn't believe them. A lot of them were hyper fixating on the fact that you could toggle top surgery scars and claiming that that ruined the entire game, and it just doesn't. I'm about a dozen hours into the game right now. My character's never been shirtless in the entire game. I even put body scars on them, not the top surgery scars, because my character's not transgender. But I found scars that were kind of similar to the lyrium tattoos that Fenris had from Dragon Age 2, and I love Fenris in Dragon Age 2. So I thought, you know what, this will be fun. So I put those on. I never get to see them. My character is always completely clothed. So it's a null point. But I did want to give, for people that actually want to know about the game itself, whether or not, because 99% of the reviews right now that I have seen, both good and bad, are not actually talking about whether it's a fun game to play, whether it's a good game to play, and they're all talking about the message it's portraying. And if it's a positive review, they're happy with the message that the game is giving out, which, fun fact, the message that the game is giving out is not actually in the game. It's just what they feel like the game is saying. And if they don't like it, they're giving it a negative review. So this is going to be my, I guess you could call it first impressions, because I haven't played through the whole game. If I had to guess, I think I'm probably around maybe a third, possibly halfway through the game, but I'd be really surprised if I was halfway through the game, because I just got my last character. I just got the final companion to join. So if I had to guess, I would say probably a third of the way through the game, because in Dragon Age Inquisition, you don't get your final companion until roughly about a third of the way into the game. So, yeah, this is going to be me talking about bare minimum, is the game fun, and whether or not I think it's a good game based on the dozen or so hours that I have in. So, for anyone that doesn't want to sit around and watch the entire video, the TLDR is I am having fun with the game. The combat system, for the most part, I think is more entertaining than the Dragon Age Inquisition and the Dragon Age 2 combat system. Dragon Age 1's combat system was completely technically it was real time, but it was technically turn based in the same way that the old like Baldur's Gate games were technically quote unquote real time, but they were just turn based where they had the turns go on a particular time period. So it's more of a strategy type game, and that combat style is a million. You can find it a million other places. So combat for the most part is fun. The writing is weak, and I'll get into more explanations to why later on, but they make a lot of really blatant mistakes in their writing. The dialogue is not particularly good. The voice acting is a bit flat. Yeah, overall, like I said, I'm enjoying my time with the game. I'm probably going to finish the game. I may even do a second run through, but Dragon Age Inquisition, this is not. So that's my review. Do I think the game is worth $70 from what I have played thus far? It's a hard sell. If you're a huge Dragon Age fan, you will probably have a good enough time with it to justify it. Otherwise, maybe wait until you get it on sale or they release some sort of DLC that makes it more interesting. So, that being said, let's actually talk about the game. Not all the politics involved, not whether it's woke or not. I want to talk about, is this a fun game to play? So the first thing I want to talk about, the combat system. Again, I have played every Dragon Age game. Dragon Age 1 or Dragon Age Origins, I never really liked because it had the same problem that I had with the Baldur's Gate combat system, which was, back then, I really loved playing spellcasting characters, and it used to happen to me all the time in Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. I would cast something like Burning Hands. Make sure, because when you start casting in Baldur's Gate 1, the game freezes so you can aim your area of effects as spells. So I aim it to ensure that none of my characters are going to get hit. And then I would cast, and there's a slight delay between clicking the button to cast the spell and aiming it and actually casting the spell, because you have to, like, conjure it. And in that, normally it's like a couple seconds. It's like 2 or 3 seconds. In that time, all of my characters would run right into the area of effect and get killed by it. And it annoyed the hell out of me every single time. It's the same problem I had with Dragon Age 1. I would play a spellcaster. I would try to use all the really cool area of effect spells. I didn't want to turn off of a friendly fire because it felt like cheating. But invariably, I would always hit my own allies. And it required so much micromanaging that I just didn't enjoy it. Dragon Age 2, I actually really enjoyed the kick of combat. Dragon Age 3, I enjoyed the combat even more. But there were issues with it. Like, your combat, like your normal attack button was just hold one of the triggers and you would go pew, 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 pew. I played a lot of mages. When we get to the combat of Dragon Age Veilguard, first of all, it's much more action-oriented. You have a light attack and a strong attack. And the reason that I call them that is that's what they refer to them in the games. But they're not. And that's probably one of my biggest gripes with the combat system is the naming that they use for everything is just poorly done. I chose to play a mage character first because I like mages in the Dragon Age series. Most mages, witches, whatever you call them, in games, even in action RPGs, the thing that the mage does is they sit there with their staff or their wand and they go, wah, wah, and that's it. And it's ungodly boring. Mages in Dragon Age, when they fight, they go boom, 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 boom. They do this really cool staff combo where they're actually attacking enemies with their staff. And in Dragon Age 2, when enemies got really close, it actually changed your combat animation. It changed your combat animation to where you were literally fighting hand to hand with your staff. And one of the things that happens in Dragon Age games is mage staffs will very often have what's called a blade at the bottom, which is, it's literally that. It is a blade on the bottom of their staff so that when somebody gets close, they have a bladed weapon to attack with. I like that. I think that's really, really interesting. And it's a much more athletic version of a wizard, whereas most other wizards are these like, I will call down the fires from the heavens and destroy you. And they just kind of sit there and cast the spells. And it's just, don't get me wrong, it's still cool and it's still interesting, but I like the more aggressive stuff. So I decided to play a mage. I have not tried the rogue. I have not tried the warrior, I think is what they're called. The warrior fighter, something like that. Their default weapon class. So the interesting thing about the Dragon Age The Veilguard combat system is you have two different fighting styles, which has been something that has been a part of Dragon Age for a while. Like, warriors would have sword and board, or they would have two-handed weapons. Rogues would have dual daggers or bows. Mages, on the other hand, were always just all you have is your staff. And they changed that in the Veilguard. Mages have a choice between the staff, which is a more long-range weapon, or you can use an orb and dagger, which is their close-range weapon. And the thing that annoys me about the quote-unquote light and heavy attacks is that they're not light and heavy attacks. I use almost exclusively orb and dagger because it's super fun and I like my melee-focused wizard. I always find, wizards that go into melee, I think that's the coolest thing ever. So, square, I played on my PS5. Square is the light attack button. And what that does is your orb is in your left hand, and so your light attack button makes you shoot little short-range bolts from your orb. Your quote-unquote heavy attack button is attacks with your dagger, which are a little bit slower, but it's not like they do significantly more damage, and there's not... Well, we'll get to that in just a second. It's not like Trials of Mana where you have like button combos where your heavy attack is like the finisher or something like that. They're just two different ways to attack. For the staff, the light attack shoots long-range bolts of magic, and the quote-unquote heavy attack just shoots this large crescent area attack. So they're not really light versus heavy. For the staff, it's ranged versus area. And for the orb and dagger, it's elemental versus strike. So the naming convention is kind of annoying. But the combat itself is actually really, really fun. You do have abilities, which has been something that has always been the thing in the Dragon Age franchise. You're really, really defined by the abilities or the spells that you pick up for your character. However, in the Veilguard, the abilities just don't get anywhere near as much use, at least as far as my wizard is concerned, because especially when you first start off, using a single ability uses up your entire mana meter. And that means that you can only use one ability probably every 6 to 10 seconds, maybe up to 30 seconds, depending on what's going on. Whereas something at Inquisition, you are, anytime your abilities are on cooldown, you are spamming them as often as possible. The same thing was true about Dragon Age 2. It was kind of similar in Dragon Age 1, but again, the combat was very different. So abilities are meant to kind of be more finishing moves and big flashy things, but the majority of the combat that you're doing is going to be a combination of light and heavy attacks, which is great. It makes for a much more dynamic combat experience than we have. And there's a dodge button and stuff like that. And for the wizard, if you double tap the dodge button, instead of just kind of like jumping out of the way, you do a short range teleport, which is super, super fun. I have an absolute blast playing this character. The problem with the combat system is it is very much focused significantly more on your light and heavy attacks. Whereas in Dragon Age Inquisition, that was basically what you did when all of your abilities were on cooldown. And that was really all it was. You just, when your abilities are on cooldown, hold down the button so you continue doing damage. But the focus of Dragon Age Inquisition was use your abilities at the right time in the right place to ensure that everything goes right. It's the exact opposite for the Veilguard. You are going to be focusing a lot on making sure that you're timing your attacks correctly, that you're using the right heavy attacks at the right time, the right light attacks at the right time. For the mage, specifically for orb and dagger, every time you hit with an orb attack, you actually put a stack of, I think they call it arcane mark on them. And if any enemy gets 3 marks, the next time you hit them, or the marks turn into an arcane bomb. And the next time you hit them with a dagger attack, it will cause the bomb to explode, doing additional damage to them. And that really is the focus of the orb and dagger playstyle in the Veilguard, is getting your arcane bomb primed, then hitting them with a dagger, rinse, repeat, and ensuring that you don't get hit. And every so often you mix in your attacks, your abilities with it, or your skills is what they call them in this. So that in and of itself is fine. I even unlocked a combo because I decided to go with the Spellblade specialization, and so I put all my stuff into getting my orb and dagger to be as cool as physically possible. And so the Spellblade, before you unlock the Spellblade, there's like an area on your skill tree before you unlock the Spellblade, and that's where I unlocked this combo. Basically, you use the orb 3 times, and then instead of having to jump forward to be able to hit them with your dagger, you just throw the dagger. And it's a really cool thing. You throw the dagger, it spins, it hits them a couple of times, and it comes back. The nice thing about it is when you're fighting a bunch of different enemies, the orb attacks have a slight area of effect where if a bunch of enemies are right next to each other, they'll all get hit by it. And then the dagger, when it throws out, it's a pretty big spinning blade. So it goes out, it'll hit all the enemies nearby. And so that's really fun. The problem being is the input recognition on the game fucking sucks. On a regular basis, I will do the 3-hit combo for my orb, press the triangle button, which is the heavy attack, which is the dagger attacks for the mage. Press the triangle button in order to throw my dagger, and they will just swing at nothing in front of them. And then I have to go through, because you can't get that dagger throw until you've hit at least 3 times with the orb. And so now I have to reset, do the 3 over, and I had like 4 or 5 times in a row where I will do the attack, and then I'll hit the button to throw my dagger, and it doesn't do it. And it's really, really dumb because there's no rhyme or reason. It's not that I've tried it where I just mash the buttons like a Dynasty Warrior game, where you just keep mashing the button until you see the animation that indicates you're at the right point, and then you start mashing the other button to get the combo that you want. I've tried playing it that way. Doesn't work. I've tried just one button press and timing the button presses. It doesn't work. It seems relatively random as to when it's going to accept that you hit the buttons right and when it's not. Now, part of that might be due to the fact that because I haven't been feeling well, I have been playing in bed a lot, which means I'm actually streaming it to my tablet. I haven't noticed a massive input lag or anything like that when I play. But that theoretically could be causing problems. But it really does. It really does make me not enjoy the combat as much. Again, I'm still having a lot of fun with it, but it becomes very, very frustrating very, very quickly. And that kind of describes the entirety of the game. There's good bones in this game. There really, really are. But the polish isn't there. And so every so often, they got the first step. They did the first part really, really well. But then when it gets to the polish and making sure that it works exactly the way it's supposed to, it just looks like they completely dropped the ball and stopped worrying about that. And I have theories as to why. I will get into my conspiracy theories at the very end of the video. But... so yeah, combat in and of itself is still fun. There are just frustrating aspects about it. Now, let's talk about the story in and of itself. There are going to be some slight spoilers for some story events. Most of these events that I'm going to talk about are going to happen within the first couple hours of the game. Because while the problems that I have with the storytelling are present through the entirety of this story, they start happening right at the beginning. And so I really only need to talk about some early stuff right in the beginning to be able to get my point across. So this is your minor spoiler warning. Again, the stuff that I'm going to talk about is not really going to ruin the game because it's all stuff that happens in the prologue, effectively. But one of my biggest problems with this story is the story that we were promised in the trailers is not the story that we were given. So, yeah. So, let's talk about this. In the trailers for Dragon Age The Veilguard, they basically set up this story of Solus, one of the characters from Dragon Age Inquisition, one of the more beloved characters in Dragon Age Inquisition, has that is eventually, spoiler alert for Dragon Age Inquisition, the very end, the final DLC. It is eventually revealed that Solus is not just some Dalish elf. Solus is actually one of the elven gods, a deity known as the Dreadwolf or the Betrayer God, and all this stuff. And in Dragon Age Inquisition, it is very, very heavily implied that the Dreadwolf is a bad deity. They did some horrible stuff. All of the elves don't like them because the Dreadwolf betrayed the rest of the elven pantheon, and now the elven pantheon doesn't exist, and it's all the Dreadwolf's fault. So the trailers that we got indicated really heavily that Solus was going to be the bad guy for the adventure. I'm going to pull off the Band-Aid right now. Unless something changes after the first 12 hours, Solus is not the bad guy. He's actually a good guy, which is the first big problem that the writing runs into is, and this is, I sort of refer to this as the World of Warcraft problem, because it's a problem that World of Warcraft has been dealing with for like 6 or 7 years at this point, which is basically every time you find a bad guy, you eventually find out they're not the bad guy. They were actually a good guy, but there was an even badder guy, and so they were doing some less than ethical things in order to protect you from the real bad guy. And then that would just happen over and over and over and over again. Every single time we found a bad guy, well, they weren't the real bad guy, they were actually a good guy. And that's kind of what happens with Solus. Without getting too much into it, Solus basically says, well, yeah, I was doing something that was kind of bad, but it was because there's this much worse thing that I was trying to save you all from, and now you guys have totally ruined it. And so for the rest of the game, Solus acts almost like your Zordon. He's a voice in your head that you have to talk to on a regular basis to figure out what's actually going on. And while, yeah, you can, there are ways to do that really, really well, but it requires a lot of forethought, it requires a lot of planning, and it requires really good writers, which the Veilguard just doesn't have. I'm not saying that these people shouldn't be working in the industry or anything, but I'm almost going to guarantee a lot of the story was written by very green writers, because they are writing things that I saw in college and in high school in creative writings, using really, really overused tropes, doing a lot of telling, not showing. I will get to that in just a second. Like, there's just all of these like obvious indications that the people that were writing this either don't have the experience to be able to write well enough to write this as a story, or simply refuse to learn their craft. Because there's a very good chance that some of the writers may have a large amount of experience, but they simply have refused to learn their craft. And so they use a lot of tropes. They use a lot of really bad methods of storytelling that just don't really work. The second kind of bait and switch that they did in the characters trailer, they showed Varric in there, and they implied heavily that Varric was going to be one of your companions. Again, spoiler alert, Varric, not a companion. He, at least for the first 12 hours, he sits on a couch doing shit. He's just there. There's a story reason as to why, but it's a bad story reason. It's just they decided that they wanted Varric in it, but they didn't want him to be a playable character. They didn't want him actually adventuring, so he is just the narrator. Which, again, it's not that I have a problem with Varric being relegated to a non-companion NPC role. It's the issue that they make it seem like Varric is going to be a companion for you, and then they go, nope, not really. And then they just move it on. And they do this constantly, over and over and over again. I'm not going to give more specific examples, but you will get this bait and switch thing where it's like, oh, you're doing this, you're doing this. Never mind, you're doing something completely different. You know, very much trying to pull off these incredible plot twists, but again, because they don't set them up correctly. Again, my theory being probably because they're very green and they just don't have the actual skill to be able to set up really good plot twists. It just happens over and over and over again, and it's just really not fun. The overall story itself is interesting. It feels like a lot of retconning. Like a lot of the stuff that you're learning about in this one seems to directly contradict lore that has been established for years, for decades even, in the Dragon Age series. But they do have kind of in-game reasons why the lore that you know is not entirely accurate. Which again is perfectly fine, but it runs into that same trope of, well, what you thought was the bad guy isn't the real bad guy, and that was actually the good guy, and these are the real bad guys. And so they're doing all this kind of light retconning, and some of it is working somewhat well. A lot of it is just going, really? Okay, like none of it is egregious. None of it is like turning Captain America into a secret Red Skull operative levels of stupid. But it's blatantly obvious what they're trying to do. And again, for fans of the series that are pretty well versed in the lore, it just feels bad, for lack of a better term. The final problem I have with the story itself, and again, overall, the story has been fun. It hasn't been particularly well written, but it's been fun, and I've been able to suspend my disbelief enough to enjoy it. But my final issue with the story is your character is a Mary Sue. What I mean by that is, in-game, or I guess this isn't the final thing. There's one other thing we have to talk about. But in-game, it's been 10 years since Dragon Age Inquisition ended. In that 10 years, Varric has been searching for Solas. Because at the end of the final Dragon Age Inquisition DLC, we find out that Solas is the Dreadwolf, and we know that he's planning something. And so, depending on the choices that you make, either the Inquisition gets becomes part of the Chantry, or the Inquisition gets disbanded, but the members still want to do something about Solas. And so the remaining members of the Inquisition kind of give Varric the task of searching for Solas, and he brings Scout Harding with him. That's how Scout Harding becomes one of your companions. A year before the game happens, Varric recruits your character for no reason. You do have a background. You choose an allegiance to one of the, I think, 6 different factions in there, and that will give you a kind of justification as to why Varric chose you. Like because I was a mage, I decided to go with the Shadow Dragons. The Shadow Dragons are basically a vigilante organization in Tevinter that fights against the Venatori, which is kind of the ruling mageocracy class, and they're very anti-slavery, which is a really, really big thing in Tevinter in general. Slaves are everywhere. So I chose that as my background because there's a magic focus to it, and I kind of liked the idea of being that kind of vigilante paladin-esque character. And I was already a mage. So why did Varric choose me? Well, because I'm the best at what I do. Why? Nobody knows. I'm just the best at what I do. For no reason. But Varric thinks I'm the coolest and the greatest. I am so good that when Varric can't lead the team like he always does, he's never led a team ever. He chooses me to be the leader of the Veilguard because he knew that I had leadership capabilities. How do we know that? Because in the year that you don't play, where you're working with Varric and Harding, you apparently were so amazing that he has absolute trust in you. This is your basic Mary Sue plot. You are a nobody and nothing, but you are so amazingly good that you instantly befriend all of the famous Kika characters and they all love you, and they look to you for leadership. Despite the fact that they have decades more experience than you in dealing with this shit, you are obviously the person to lead them. And it just feels so bad. When you look at Dragon Age Inquisition, you again have a similar situation where you have a character that really has no reason to be the leader, being thrust into a leadership position. However, there's a big difference. The Inquisitor in Dragon Age Inquisition has the mark. They are the only person in existence that can close fade rifts. So that is why you are special. And they eventually explain why it was that you got it. It was mostly an accident. But it makes sense. It doesn't turn you into this cosmic anomaly where you are just the most amazing person in the world. You just happen to be at the right place at the right time for a good reason. Like they do give you a reason why you were there when the Divine was getting attacked and everything, and why you got the... All that stuff is written relatively well, and it explains why you become the Inquisitor. In this one, you are the head of the Veilguard because Varys likes you. Varric likes you. That's it! And you are continually... Like, they try... there was a scene that I did recently where you eventually have to make a decision. It's a tough decision, of course. And after the decision is over, Varric is kind of like talking to you. And they try to make this really emotional scene where it's like, oh, heavy is the head that wears the crown style thing. But again, they keep talking about, man, I can't believe that I'm the leader of this. It's so hard being a leader. I wish I wasn't the only person in the world that could lead this group. And you aren't. There's absolutely no reason that you are leading it instead of Varric or instead of literally anyone else in the party. Everyone else in the party has significantly more experience than you do. You are the least experienced person of the entire party, and for some odd reason, that makes you the most qualified and the only person that can lead. Now, are there ways to write a character that is the least experienced but then becomes the leader? Absolutely. There's a lot of really great ways that you can do that. You know, the idea of, leadership being thrust upon you and things like that. That's a common story element for kind of coming of age tales, and it definitely does happen. The writers, again, simply do not have the skill to create that thing. And so they just kind of skipped over all the things that would have explained why you are the only person that could lead this group and just declare, well, that's what it is. And it really sucks because I like my character. I think they're really, really cool. And I like the background that I chose. I think it's really, really cool. But so much of the defining aspects of my character happened off screen. And it's just not fun. I didn't get to experience any of it. And this is the final problem I had with their storytelling, is they do not understand the idea of show, don't tell. What I mean by that, that's actually, it's a term that I learned in theater. I don't know if it originated in the theater or if it actually originates in literature. But the idea is, if you want the audience to learn about something that's happening, you should show them it's happening. You want the audience to understand that your character has a softer side. Have them show that softer side. Write a scene where, while everyone else thinks that you're this hard ass and this evil person, they eventually find a dog, and the character comes down and is very, very cute and nice with the dog, and he cuddles with him, and then he goes back to being the hard ass that he was. That's show, don't tell. If you just tell, instead of having a scene where the audience experiences that, you have a bunch of characters standing around going, yeah, Colonel Shitface is really a pain in the ass and I can't stand him. And then one of the other people goes, no, I saw him play with a dog and he was very emotionally vulnerable there. So he has a soft side. That's tell, don't show. The vast majority of exposition for this game is tell, don't show. Again, the story for The Veilguard starts a year before you play, which there's a term in writing called in media res. And basically what that means is it's a literary technique where you start the story in the middle of the action. So a story might start in the middle of a battle. Like if you've ever seen the movie Starship Troopers, it's a really great example of on media res. Because the first scene of Starship Troopers is actually a fight that the troopers are having against the bugs. And it goes very, very poorly. In the first, 10 minutes of the movie you watch as all these people get killed in that. And then they do flashbacks to explain how they got there. But it's actually a really effective way to grab your audience's attention. You put them right into the middle of the action, the most exciting part of the story. Then you leave it on a cliffhanger, and then you go back to go, by the way, this is how we got there. So effectively, what Dragon Age Inquisition tries to do is, or not Inquisition, the Veilguard tries to do, is to do an in media res. They put you right in the most pivotal part of the story. If you've seen the gameplay demonstration that they showed a few months back, that mission where you're going through the Tevinter city, and eventually go up and have to deal with Solus trying to open up the rift. That is the first adventure that you play in the game. That's the first mission that you go on. That's where the game starts, is right there. So it's very much an in media res. The way that in media res works is you start in the action and then you eventually have to explain how you got to that point. And that's generally done through flashbacks and other things like that. It's not how it's done in the Veilguard. The Veilguard will just randomly have a line of dialogue that explains away, oh yeah, this is just like when you and I took out all of those slavers single-handedly, and we were able to save everybody in the entire world. Don't you remember how that happened? Would have enjoyed it a lot more if I actually got to play that experience instead of having someone tell me that was really, really cool. And this happens constantly. Again, the actual game should have started a year plus prior. Because again, Varric has been hunting Solus for 10 years at this point. You get involved roughly a year or so before that. So there's all of this exposition that they just completely left out. And the biggest issue with that, which again, in media res, completely legitimate thing. But the world changes so much in that year that you're doing this, and motivations and everything change so much that you can't rely on your knowledge of Dragon Age Inquisition to understand what's going on here, because again, there's a lot of retconning going on. There's a lot of things that you're like, wait a minute, didn't we learn in Inquisition this? Well, yeah, but in that year that we don't let you play, this happened, and that's why it's different. Well, why couldn't I experience that? Why am I not allowed to experience all the stuff when the world changes? I only get to experience effectively this brand new world. Well, that would have been boring. No, it would have been interesting. Even if it was just little vignettes where you get to experience it in tiny little pieces, it still would have been better. Again, show, don't tell. And the writers for this simply are incapable of understanding that. It gets worse. After every major mission, which is your story missions and then your character NPC missions. So each one of your companions, they have their own little quest line. The quest lines in and of themselves, at least the ones that I've done so far, are fun. They're interesting. They've made me enjoy the characters more. My personal favorite character right now is Lucanus. He is this cool Spanish assassin. He's the most amazing dude ever. And I love the Spanish accent. I think it's great. He sounds like Antonio Banderas, but cooler. He's a great character. I take him everywhere with me. So those are really fun. But at the end of every single big mission, again, story missions and companion missions, Varric will come back and you will get this cool illustration that talks about what happens after. Every single time. It'll be like, yeah, he'll give a brief summary. So yeah, the Veilguard went and did this, and there was a cool thing that happened. And then because of that, all of these other things happened. And at the end of every one of these things, and this thing that they don't know about, but I'm going to tell you so we can create, there's a term for it. It's called dramatic irony, where the audience knows something that the characters in the show don't. We're going to create some dramatic irony by telling you exactly what's going to happen next with this preview. It really feels like a mobile game. And I'm not saying like it feels like a really crappy thing. No. The thing with mobile games in general, I'm not talking exclusively phones. I'm talking about games that you used to get on like Game Boy and Game Boy Advanced and stuff like that. They had to be set up so that you could play them in little short bursts. So most portable games, I guess we call it portable games instead of mobile. Most portable games would be set up in like a mission structure or something like that, to where you had plenty of chances to be able to put it down because it was designed to be played on the go. It wasn't designed to be something that you sit down for like 6 hours and play straight. You're supposed to play an hour here, hour and a half here, 2 hours there, stuff like that. And that's kind of what the Veilguard feels like, with these exposition dumps after every major event. The artwork that they have in them is really, really cool. I don't think that's bad in any way, shape, or form. But it just gets old really, really quick. And I am really tired of getting spoiled for the game I'm about to play by the game I'm playing. I literally just had an adventure, a mission that I ran, got me my final character. And at the end of it, they're explaining, oh, the Veilguard did this and it was super, super cool. But they've unlocked, they've drawn the ire of this particular character's mortal enemy, whom they will now have to face in the near future. Name of the bad guy. I'm just sitting there going, really? Why couldn't that be a surprise? The characters don't know it's happening. Why couldn't that be a surprise to me too? Why did you have to tell me that you're going to, oh, but you're not allowed to be careful yet because this really bad thing is coming? We're smart. We know that bad things are coming. We don't need you to blatantly tell us, oh, here comes the bad thing. And it just over and over and over and over and over again, tell, don't show, tell, don't show, tell, don't show. From a writing perspective, a lot of times when writers are not doing the show, don't tell, they're just doing exposition dumps. It's because they are not confident enough in their writing that they think that they could explain it well in a scene. And so they just go, well, in order for them to understand that, they're going to need to do this. So I'm just going to tell them this stuff, and then they'll be able to understand why this is so important. Again, it's a sign of an inexperienced writer and can't think of the word that I'm thinking. It's a sign of a writer that doesn't trust their own skills. A lot of these writers might be significantly better than what they're showing here, but they simply have a lack of confidence in their own writing abilities, and so they are just constantly doing these exposition dumps over and over and over. Is it ruining the game? No. Again, I'm still having fun. I'm still enjoying the story. I'm still enjoying the game. I'm not saying this is an awful, horrible, disgusting game. What I'm saying is it should be, and not could be, it should be a lot better. Final thing I wanted to talk about is the dialogue in and of itself. We've already talked about the writing, but I specifically want to focus on the dialogue. The dialogue is very, very hit or miss. I've heard a lot of people kind of describing it like Buffy the Vampire Slayer quips constantly, and I wouldn't go that far. I have played games where it's just constantly quip, 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 quip. And I actually really enjoy very quippy style characters. This is one of the reasons why I really like Spider-Man as a character. Because he has always, long before Buffy the Vampire Slayer was ever anything, Spider-Man has always been that character that is constantly shooting off these one-liners and quips and all this stuff, and he is like insulting the enemies as he's fighting them. It's one of my favorite aspects about Spider-Man because it makes him really fun to watch. So it's not that I have a problem with anything like that. And I wouldn't say the dialogue is excessively quip heavy. That being said, it's not particularly well written. Most of the dialogue is fine, but you will get quite a few times where it's obvious to me that whomever was writing particular scenes of dialogue had no experience with characters like that. In the idea, like, a good example, when non-disabled people write dialogue for disabled people, one of the more common things that will happen is you will see this huge emphasis put on them talking about their disability and bringing their disability to the forefront constantly. It's like, well, yeah, it's because, my wheels here, or you can just call me Wheels. The vast majority of people with disabilities do not talk about them. Even if they are blatantly obvious, we just don't like bringing them up because most of us have experienced discrimination because of our disabilities. Constantly. So why would we invite that? But again, when you don't understand the characters that you're writing for because you've never actually interacted with a real person that has struggled with that particular experience, you come up in your head how you think it should be and how you think you would deal with it. And again, insecurity and stuff like that will constantly make them go, well, I'm writing a disabled character, and so I most definitely need to make sure that everybody understands that this is a disabled character, so I'm going to tell everyone that they're disabled all the time. Everyone knows they're disabled. Now, I'm not saying that there is a character in this that is missing a foot. I didn't realize they were missing a foot until I was in a cutscene with them, and I saw their prosthetic. We've never mentioned it. We've never acknowledged it. They haven't hung a lantern on it. If you're not familiar with that term, that's where you actually have, like, you're using a very, very obvious trope in there. And to acknowledge, yes, this is a trope, I know, but I'm doing it on purpose for a payoff later on. You do what's called hanging a lantern on it, which basically you just point out, yeah, we get that this is a trope. Stay tuned. We're going to do something cool with it. They didn't even do that. So this is not me saying that the disability representation in this is bad. It is the exact opposite. We have not had a single conversation about this character's missing foot. So I'm not saying that. But I use that as an example because I am disabled, and it's something that I think a lot of people are familiar with because disabled representation in media has been horrible for a century. Probably more so, but that's how long I've been looking at it. So you just constantly have these bits of dialogue that just feel really, really awkward, like they were written by someone who's never dealt with these particular issues. And sometimes it's again, it's issues of leadership. Again, that idea of the player character sitting there going, "Oh man, I wish there was someone else in the world that could do this, but I'm the only person that can lead this." I've been in leadership positions many times. I've been in leadership positions in situations that I did not want to be in leadership positions. I have helped run rebellions and the things like that. And a lot of times it has simply been because I am a naturally charismatic person, and in a situation of crisis, it's very common for people to look to me for answers because I present myself as a very knowledgeable person. So I have been in situations where I've had to make decisions that are not great. None of them life or death. Don't think I'm talking about, well, I saved all these people. But no, I've just been in like some labor disputes and stuff like that, and stuff when I was in high school of like the school trying to shut down a show I was in or something like that. Simple stuff like that. But there were still places where I was put into a position of leadership without really wanting to be it in that, simply because somebody needed to be, and if I didn't, someone who was less experienced and less skilled at that particular thing would, and bad things would happen. Never in my life would I say anything even remotely similar to what was written in this really poorly written scene. These writers, again, it's not that they are bad writers that should never write to me, it seems like you have a very inexperienced team. And what I mean by that is not so much that the team is very young, though, again, part of me thinks that the writing team is probably on the younger side in general. But it's the fact that even the older writers just have a very limited amount of experience in the real world. I've mentioned this to a few of my friends, but Hollywood in and of itself isn't real. What I mean by that is people that grow up in the entertainment industry, or people that spend a long time in the entertainment industry, live in a world that doesn't exist. The entertainment industry is so incredibly overflowing with activism and the hyper rich. And so the world that a lot of people in the entertainment industry live in is so different from literally everywhere else in the world. If you go probably like 15-20 miles outside of LA, you will find a completely different world that most of the entertainment industry has no idea exists. And they get into their heads that the entire world works like Hollywood, and it just doesn't. And anyone that never leaves that bubble will have a very strange perception of everyone else, and they will be completely flabbergasted when people make decisions that they wouldn't make, because they're in this such incredibly homogenized area. Everybody thinks the same or very similarly. Everybody is told the exact same thing. The world works in the exact same way every single time. And it's just not how the rest of the entirety of the world works. That's why you have so many people that seem so out of touch in Hollywood. It's not that they are these, incredibly narcissistic people. They literally have not experienced, some of them in decades. Some of them, if you grew up in it, some of them have never experienced the real world. And so it's not that they're these incredibly narcissistic people that actually don't care about people with differing views. They've never actually met someone with a different view. They've never experienced anything outside of their little bubble. And I will almost guarantee you, the entirety or most of the writing staff has never dealt with a lot of the stories that they were trying to tell, because they tell them very poorly, and the dialogue is a perfect example of that. Is it the worst dialogue that I've ever heard? No. I've heard a lot worse. But it's still very noticeable. And again, a lot of it just comes down to inexperience. if you had a better writing staff, a lot of these problems wouldn't be happening. And again, it's not that I think all these writers should be fired. I think they need to work more. I think that they need more experience. I don't think that they're a lost cause and should never work in the game again. I think a lot of them are just inexperienced and need a few more games under their belt. Need to leave either Seattle or Los Angeles, because they're basically the same at this point. They need to get out of their little bubble and actually talk to real people. So yeah. The final thing I have to talk about, because it has become a huge thing, is all the transgender ideology. There is a clip right now on YouTube of Asmongold going, and there's an item that you are forced to interact with in the game. I think it's called Varric's Shaving Mirror. And it happens, again, in the first, hour and a half, 2 hours. You are forced to interact with this item. You cannot continue playing the game until you interact with this item. And the item is basically a toggle to turn on transgender dialogue options. It's the entire purpose of this item. And Asmongold went and took the choice that basically turned transgender dialogue options on, and then he was only given the choice of having a transgender character. And he goes, "Oh my God, they're pushing their trans ideology on them." They're not. You literally push the button to turn transgender options on, and then got mad that all the options are transgender. That was the entire purpose of pushing the button. I interacted with the object as well. And when I was looking at it, they give you 3 different ways to turn it on and only one way to turn it off. And the way to turn it off, and it's not really clearly stated what they all do. They're very, very ambiguous. But if you take a few seconds to look over what was going on, I took the one option of put the mirror down. And that's why it doesn't force you to make that choice and choose, it's just you have to look at the mirror, and that will give you the option to basically turn on all the transgender dialogue options. And I just clicked the button that said put the mirror back down, because my character's not trans, and I don't want to play that particular adventure this time. That's not the character that I built. I have not had any transgender nonsense showing up in my game. I didn't have the really, there's a couple scenes out there that just show this really, really poorly written dialogue that it seems like they're shoehorning this trans ideology in there. I have not experienced any of that because I put the mirror down. I just didn't push the button that said, please put all the transgender stuff into my game. There's a button that says that. It's very easy to understand that that's what it is. If you don't push the button, as far as I can tell thus far, again, I'm only about a dozen hours in. As far as I can tell, as long as you don't push that button, it's not a part of the game. Anyone claiming that you are forced to do this does not know what they're talking about. Yes, you are forced to interact with the button so that you know that the transgender options are there, but you do not have to press the button. And I didn't. And again, I've been having a delightful time with the game. There's a lot of frustrating things about the game, yes, but I've still been having fun. So, my theory. This is all theoretical. That is I guess I'll put my review of the game here as well. So for those of you that stayed this long, my total review of the game, overall, this is a fun game. I'm enjoying myself. I'm going to play more of the game once I'm done recording this vlog. It is a fun game. It has issues. The controls are not particularly precise, and the combat in and of itself requires more precision than the controls allow for. That's annoying. The storytelling is interesting, but is poorly done, and is constantly giving you exposition dumps instead of allowing you to experience the story, which is the entire purpose of playing a video game, is to experience the story. The dialogue is written by people that don't know how real people speak. It's not horrible. It's not the worst thing I've ever read, but it's noticeable and it's annoying. And I think that is the worst part about this game is the game is annoying. It's fun, but there's enough in here that are things that are just annoying. Is it annoying enough to make me not want to play the game? No. Is it annoying enough for me to regret purchasing the game? No. I'm still having fun with the game. It's a fun game. But it's an annoying fun game. So, your mileage may vary, but as far as I can tell, the idea that this transgender ideology is, in fact, it's not really there. You can avoid it, at least in the first dozen hours, I've been able to avoid it almost completely. So, my theory, and this is based on some of the research that I've seen from some slightly less than reputable sources, so I've done my own research to a point. My theory about this, it feels like to me that this game was not meant to be a Dragon Age game. What I mean by that, it's not that they took a game that they were already creating and then slapped the Dragon Age logo on it. It's not that. It's always been developed as a Dragon Age game. But the people that are running this game wanted to tell the story about a transgender character succeeding, which is not a bad thing. This is not me like poo-pooing on or anything like that, but it seems fairly obvious this game was meant to have. The game was designed around the idea of having a transgender character be the hero of this. This is a story, and part of that hero's journey was not just that the transgender character existed in the world, but all of the struggles that transgender people have to deal with in the real world. This particular character had to deal with them and was able to overcome them as they become the savior of the world. That in and of itself is not a bad thing. I have seen quite a few different games where someone that is from a marginalized group, or I guess bits of entertainment medium, not specifically video games, but where someone from a marginalized group has decided, you know what, I'm tired of always being the butt of the joke. I'm going to create my own world and my own story where someone like me gets to be the hero and gets to, triumph over all the stuff that I have to struggle with. This is an extremely common thing to see in media in general. This is my theory, is that is what the goal of the game was. Now, the problem with that particular subject matter is has such a limited market right now that, again, this idea of the writers simply not having the confidence in their own skill to actually use it, it feels like to me that was the story that they wanted to tell, but they didn't think if they made their own game like that, they would be able to tell that story. And so what they did is they took a franchise that already exists and used it to tell the story that they wanted to tell. Which, again, is not the worst thing in the world. It is an extremely common thing that's been happening over and over and over again. But the way that they did that, and I think that's one of the reasons why you have so many exposition dumps and things like that, is because the world of Thetis and the world of Dragon Age is not a great place to tell that story. People have mentioned this over and over and over again. Dragon Age, the series in and of itself, is a remarkably liberal-leaning series. It tends to extol and uplift the ideas that are very popular with left-wing individuals in general. The idea of community and sharing, and the idea of everyone has basic human rights, and fighting against fascism, and fighting against capitalism. Capitalism is very often shown in a very negative little light. Rich people are almost always villains in it. Like, it is a very left-leaning society, and in order to tell a story about how someone that would be very left-leaning is being oppressed in a world that is already very much left-leaning. They had to shift the entire world into a very right-aligned world in order to create a world where they could be oppressed long enough to overcome it. And that's why you have all these strange retcons that are not like complete rewriting history or anything like that, but established ideas are no longer established, and they change and things like that. And in order to change the world that drastically would take an entire game in and of itself to show the world changing into this new world state where they could tell the story that they wanted to tell. And that is not okay. I get it. You want to tell a story, but if that's the story you want to tell and you're going to tell it in an established world, you have to pick a world where you can tell that story. You're not allowed to take an established world and then change everything about it so that you can tell the story that you want. And that might be one of the reasons why there's been quite a few things that have happened in the game where I sit there and go, wait, what? That doesn't make sense. Like, there's been these strange kind of jumps where something was happening and then it feels like I missed part of the game, and then there's a completely different world state. Part of me wonders, and I will probably try to replay the game after I'm done with this playthrough with the transgender options on, because I think I'm missing... Thank you, phone. I think I am missing important aspects of the story because I decided not to turn on the transgender options. Which, again, I don't believe that that's evil or disgusting or anything. However, I do believe that it's a disservice to the fans if you are going to link important parts of this as a story to an optional aspect, and then not tell people, by the way, if you turn this off, you're going to miss parts of the story. That's deceitful. You're trying to trick people into experiencing the story that you would want, which again is another really common thing that either inexperienced or inexperienced writers or just writers that are not confident in their own abilities will do, is they'll trick you into experiencing the story that they want to tell, because they think if they tried to just tell you the story they wanted to tell, no one would read it, or no one would watch it, or anything like that. So the only way to tell the story that they want is they have to trick you into it. Again, does that make me think that they're evil, disgusting people? No. To me, that makes me think that, again, you had a very green writer's room. Which is not an uncommon thing. It's how it is. Because of the large pushes for diversity and stuff like that. And again, this is not me saying that diversity is bad or anything like that. This is me saying when, it's perfectly logical. If you are changing the makeup of the writers' rooms, that invariably means that the people that you are getting out of there that have been in there for a long time, because they were the only people that are allowed to be in that space for a very long time, you're going to be getting rid of experienced people and putting people that are brand new, because up until that point, they haven't been allowed to be in there. So again, this is not me saying that this is a bad thing, but this is me saying this is the problem with having inexperienced people doing things that used to be done by extremely experienced people. Is you're going to run into problems like that, which is not the end of the world. Again, the only way you become experienced is by getting experience. These people that are now getting into writers' rooms that have never had the chance to be in writers' rooms need experience. They need to work on games and stuff like that. However, because you have these inexperienced people doing stuff like this, you're going to have these problems of tell, don't show. You're going to have these problems of poorly written dialogue because they've never talked to a real person. You're going to have these problems of the world not fitting the story that they want to tell, so they just change the world instead of creating their own world to tell this story in. Does it ruin the game for me? No, but again, I haven't seen any of the stuff that most of the people are complaining about because I didn't push the button. And because of that, I've had a fun time. I have no idea if I'm going to hate the game when I replay it and turn those options on. But for right now, I've been having fun. Aside from the annoying problems, it's still fun. And I'm still following the story for the most part. Yeah, like I said, it's just frustrating. More than anything else, it's just frustrating. Because this could have been a really, really cool story. And I'm not saying it's a bad story. It's just it could have been a lot better and a lot more epic. But it's been bogged down by forcing the world to change in a massive way in order to tell the story that you wanted to tell. And through just really, really inexperienced writers using tropes that they shouldn't be using because they don't have the experience to understand how to use them correctly. So, yeah, I'm going to finish the game. I'm probably going to enjoy the game the entire time. But it's a bit of a letdown that it could have been better. And again, my theory, that is entirely what this is the reason there are so many changes that don't make sense is the people in charge wanted to tell a very specific story. And unfortunately for them, that particular story did not fit into the world of Thetis. So they changed Thetis so they could tell the story that they wanted to tell. It's not a bad thing that they wanted to tell that story. I think that story could have been a very, very cool, interesting story to tell. But because they decided to tell that story in a place where it wasn't, you couldn't tell that story, they made some bad decisions in order to force the story that they wanted to tell. And that really is kind of what the Veilguard does. It does feel significantly more linear than Inquisition. It's very much mission based, as opposed to having this kind of open world that you just get to explore. Everything is very much, you're going here for a particular purpose. Every so often there's some side quests to do, but it's very, very pointed. And it's because they wanted to tell a very specific story. A story that I don't think fit very well in the world of Thetis, and they changed Thetis in order to tell the story that they want. And I don't think they changed it particularly well. That being said, I'm still having fun. I'm still going to enjoy myself until something really egregious happens. Like, you kill my Lucanus, kill him off. Don't you dare. That's my boy. I likes him. Other than that, I'm having fun. That's all for me today. If you guys have views or opinions on it, feel free to put them in the comments down below. But again, that's all for me today. I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.